Well, welcome back. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will testify in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today regarding President Trump's recent summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin. The hearing expected to be intense following two major summits held in the past 2 months. Joining us now to talk more about that is Christian Whiton. He is former State Department senior advisor under Trump and George W. Bush and former North Korean human rights deputy special envoy. Christian, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
What are you expecting? Lawmakers are hoping Pompeo's testimony will clarify the administration's policies on Russia post that summit. Many are also hoping to uncover what was said between the president and Putin in private. Do you expect we'll learn any of that?
I think we'll get a little more detail from Pompeo, and the three topics will be North Korea, Russia, and also Iran. Pompeo has made some news and gave a speech out at the Reagan Library on Iran this week. However, I think you're also going to get a lot of partisan sparks. The Foreign Relations Committee used to be known for bipartisanship and, frankly, a fair amount of deference to a Secretary of State. It's become much more like the Judiciary Committee, partisan. You have, of course, a Democratic ranking member, Menendez, but also the chairman, Bob Corker, has become almost a never-Trump Republican. So I think you're going to see a lot of attention on Russia and a lot of gotcha efforts toward the secretary.
And also North Korea, right? I mean, we need an update in terms of where that stands. A number of U.S. Defense Department officials preparing to travel to South Korea in the coming days to assist with the expected repatriation of U.S. service members' remains from the Korean War. But a lot of uncertainty here, especially the transfer remains without a final approval from North Korea. Do you think North Korea will follow through on this?
I think eventually they will. They said they will, and they have proceeded with talks more or less on the timeline that was agreed in Pompeo's last visit to Pyongyang. They did miss one meeting, but as it turns out, they gave a range of possible dates for a meeting in Panmunjom, and they followed through on the last date. And that's sort of a confidence-building measure. That's to bring home the remains of Americans who've been there since 1950, 1953, who died in the war. There's a lot else to update that Pompeo could provide information on. There's this dismantling of the rocket assembly facility in North Korea. That was the one specific thing Trump and Kim talked about in Singapore, and the fact that there is progress on that is very good. Also, Pompeo is likely to go to the region next week for an ASEAN meeting in Singapore and Jakarta and may, in fact, bump into North Koreans on the side. I doubt he'll talk about that, but we should get a little more detail.
Christian, one of the biggest impediments that's been speculated about the North Korean negotiations is the interference by China. And right now it seems that we're only having escalations in our discussions with China, with the tariffs. So where do you think the implications are with North Korea and Mike Pompeo and his negotiations, given that China seems to be really interjecting in those affairs?
Right. And a fundamental part of the Pompeo approach to North Korea, which differs with that in the George W. Bush administration and the Clinton administration, which failed, is frankly not to put China in the center of these discussions. When six-party talks were held in the Bush administration, they were almost always in Beijing, later to move in part to North Korea. But trying to create an economic future for North Korea that is not dependent on China has been a big part of it. That, and frankly, is part of engaging Russia. We don't know how specifically that came up between Trump and Putin, but they reportedly did discuss North Korea. Russia has a great fear of China. It has a very unpopulated East. China has a very populated nation. So Russia can use labor but doesn't want Chinese labor. That might be an area of cooperation. So China also does things that are unhelpful. And while they are not wholesale violating the sanctions against North Korea, we do think they've gotten a little loosey-goosey with enforcement.
Hey, Christian, Bob Nardelli here. You've served in several administrations, and so you would have an insight. President Trump is talking about taking away security clearance, for example, from Brennan and others. What's your point of view on that? Is that going to be a good thing, or what's the implications?
I've always thought it was weird that people actually would even want to keep these clearances, because if you plunge into academia or consulting, the easiest way not to be accused of leaking classified information is to say you don't have a clearance. It's sort of a vestige of a time when these positions were held by people who had a bipartisan inclination. The idea being you might want to bring people back who had done the job before, who, even if they were from a different party, a president or a secretary, may want to call on a predecessor and have automatic access to the highest, be able to give them access to very highly classified information. But now you have things like the former CIA director, the former director of national intelligence, who have gone and become extremely partisan talking heads. So, this is sort of another thing that's been politicized, and I think what Trump has done is just catching up with the times.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you've got Brennan and Clapper trashing the president daily almost on CNN.
Right, and this isn't just going to a think tank and saying, I respectfully disagree with the policies of my successor, and this is what we try to do. That's gone out the door. To go to the most partisan of partisan TV networks, to become a paid talking head, to accuse the president of treason. If you do those types of things, you really shouldn't expect to have a clearance. Clearances for people in the executive branch or the legislative branch who need that for their job.
But, Christian, we should point out that taking away their security clearances isn't going to shut them up.
No.
I mean,
no, but if they're leaking important information that they have access to, then that's a different story. And there are leaks on CNN.
If they were doing that, then they should prosecute them, because that is against the law, is leaking classified information. One thing I'll add, if John Brennan, Bob Goodlatte told you on Sunday that he wants to call John Brennan in front of Congress, in front of his committee. If John Brennan has to look at any classified documents as part of that testimony, he will need to have his security clearance in place. They could put it back in.
Right.
They could give him temporary clearance. But just to point this out, this has been treated, this is from a 32-year military veteran. These security clearances have been, they're essentially part of a golden parachute that are given to these ex-intelligence officials when they go out looking for very lucrative consulting jobs. And I think every American is shocked that these things are still in place after they leave service.
Yes. Especially as, like we said, you have these people on CNN trashing what is going on at the White House and President Trump's policies daily, over and over again. We'll see that list. There's about 50 names on the list of the people that Goodlatte wants to question in testimony, and John Brennan is on that list. So maybe they revoke it and then they put it back. We'll see. Christian, thanks for weighing in here. Important information here. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Christian Whiton joining us there.